This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Daily Business News for people who make their own decisions. I'm Adam Lang, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Adam.
Okay, this weekend show is all about the two of us each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and our favourite story. Every week we're joined by a judge to pick a winner. Now, normally that is me trying to decode and decipher and understand what Michael and Sean are going to say. But since Michael's on holidays this week, I've become a contestant, and we have invited our resident economist and all-round great guy, Stephen Koukoulas, to do the honours. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Adam. I'm absolutely honoured, privileged and thrilled to be the judge on the weekend edition of Fear and Greed and seeing you two go toe-to-toe, head-to-head on these amazing criteria.
Well, it's not like you haven't done it before, because I don't want to start abusing the judge early. However, the last few weeks, there seems to be a little bit of collusion, I suppose. Collusion between Stephen and Michael Thompson. And Michael's been talking economics thanks to you, Kook.
As a regular listener to the weekend edition, normally when I'm just going for a bit of a walk on my way to get a cup of coffee on a Saturday, lunchtime, whatever, I hear poor old Michael, and he's usually dragged over the coals that, so I thought, mate, I've got to give you a bit of a hand. I'm one of these equalisers. I think we should be sort of having a bit of fairness in this. And, so I just contacted Michael and said, mate, you've got to beat Sean. This is unfair. You can't be the loser week in, week out, struggling to get a draw occasionally. So, look, I offered a helping hand.
Nice guy. I would just like to put out there also, Stephen, just before we start, is that, Adam's on holidays. He's sounding a bit different. He's not in the studio this morning. Michael's on holidays. I'm the one here holding up the fort, so keep that in mind. Can we get into it? Can I tell you my biggest story of the week?
Please do. Let's hear your big one.
There's only one big story this week. Just one. US politics. Well, there's probably hundreds of important global stories around the place, but we're ignoring those. Really, it's all about US politics. Let's start with the crowd that isn't in power. The Republicans. Their leader, Donald Trump, has somehow managed to unite the party. And this is one of the most divisive individuals you'll ever come across. Well, since the assassination attempt last weekend, he has somehow managed to unite the party. Even his enemies like him, at least they do during the Republican National Convention. He is now favourite to win the US presidential poll in November. He gave a typically firebrand speech yesterday. He said he had changed the speech post the shooting. And in fact, I don't know about the speech, but I liked what he said before the speech mostly. He said his first speech, the one he was going to give, was an absolute humdinger. He said it would have been one of the most incredible speeches. Anyway, nice. The other touch I really liked about Donald Trump was all the supporters wearing the ear bandage. It sort of became a fashion statement at the Republican National Convention. Now, I'd also want to talk about J.D. Vance. He's the author of Hillbilly Elegy, a lawyer, startup tech man, and a one-time ferocious anti-Trumper. He's now the nomination for vice president. He loves Big Donald now. His speech at the convention railed against Wall Street, railed against corporate America. He put economic populism at the centre of the campaign. The 39-year-old millennial spoke of his impoverished upbringing and said Donald Trump's Make America Great movement was the champion of American workers. It's ironic. I mean, he's anti-trade and, he wants everyone to spend more money to buy a washing machine in the years to come because you won't be able to trade washing machines and stuff like that. Anyway, the other thing we better talk about is Joe Biden. It's all part of the same story. Wow, it gets worse and worse for the president. Two very senior Democrats, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries have come out against him. There are reports that Barack Obama, the former president, has been suggesting he rethink his candidacy. He ended up with COVID during the week. He says that he wants to keep going, but the most recent reports say that he is actually reconsidering. I don't know whether he'll make it. I think there's a more than even chance now that he won't stand for the presidency, but it's sort of a very close run thing. The whole point of this is whoever is the president of the US is the president of the free world, and that affects us all. Massive story.
Big story. I have to admit it's a big story. Adam, you've got to come up with something massive.
Massive.
To overtake that one. So fire away.
All right. Mine is massive markets. So this week, the S&P ASX 200 hit a record high of over 8,000 points on Monday morning. And why is this the biggest business story of the week? Stock prices are a key indicator of future profits. So record ASX levels signal strong profits for Australian businesses, and that is making this big news. So how did we get here? It took 3 years for the S&P ASX 200 to climb from 7,000 to 8,000 points, but the last 9 months have been incredible. Since hitting a low in October 23, the ASX has surged 18%, and it's not just us. Wall Street, the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and the Stocks Europe 600 are also trading at record levels. Wall Street boasts the magnificent 7 technology stocks. So that's Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta Platforms, Tesla, and Nvidia, making up 30% of the S&P 500's value. Here in Australia, we have the big 4 banks. Financials make up over 30% of our market. So when the banks do well, our index does well. Commonwealth Bank is at record levels. NAB, ANZ and Westpac are all at multi-year highs. The banks are driving our ASX index north. Our big 3 miners, that's BHP, Fortescue and Rio Tinto, have lagged. But our technology sector has been a standout, even though it only accounts for about 3% of the index. Now, why are we hitting this new peak?
Now, hold on. I'm coming in with a protest here. Firstly, you are carrying on for about as long as Michael does, possibly longer. Secondly, we've had about 4 stories in here so far, and now you're introducing a new one. Just putting it out there. Keep going, Adam. Just want you to keep that in mind, Kook.
I'm listening carefully. I'm listening carefully, Adam.
Don't suck up to the Kook on interest rates. Go on, Adam. Go on.
And why are we hitting this new peak? Interest rates and expectations about where they are heading. The rally of the last 9 months has reflected a slowdown of rate hikes in Australia and the US, and recently, expectations of rate cuts have driven the market higher, and this stock market surge is more about the macro environment than specific stock fundamentals. So where from here? The current US quarterly earnings season and Australia's upcoming annual results season.
Story number 8 in this. Go on. Keep going.
I'll be unswayed, Sean, are crucial as investors focus on individual companies. The optimists see the market rising with Wall Street, driven by lower US interest rates. However, the skeptics warn of high rates, potential recessions, geopolitical risks, and US election uncertainties. So what do we have? Record ASX level, investor confidence, and high stakes expectations. This is the biggest business story of the week.
I'm left with a dilemma. Yeah, Adam's omnibus.
Omnibus.
Which,
Can we call it a multi-omnibus? Is there such a thing?
that could be multi-omnibus.
Market is so multi-layered.
I've got a dilemma because clearly Adam's story about the ASX hitting record highs is immediate to probably most listeners to this podcast who have got investments in shares, probably, certainly through their superannuation funds. And so those of us who look at their superannuation fund balance semi-regularly would probably be getting a lovely, pleasant surprise. And that is big news. It's adding to our wealth and a really important part of what makes a good economy. Sean's story, massive, of course. The leader of the US, the free world, and with Trump now favourite, his offside or a bit of a
loose cannon,
fair to say, on economics. If Trump wins and Vance's agenda comes to anywhere near fruition, that creates massive economic problems. So on this one, it's a very close finish, but I'm checking the photo finish on my camera. Winner is Sean by a nose.
I was ready to go for a protest, but however,
no, Sean wins that one. But gosh, it was close. Adam's comprehensive coverage of the stock market.
Comprehensive coverage there, nicely put.
So, Sean,
1-0.
Yeah, 1-0.
1-0.
All right. Well, that takes us to the most remarkable category. Sean, can I go first on this one?
Yeah. Go, so long as you don't go on and on and on, you can. And so long as it's only one story. Go on.
I'll do my best. Okay, this is one story, but 5 principal letters.
Oh.
The CFMEU.
Oh.
So the CFMEU represents workers in the construction, forestry, maritime, mining and energy industries. And they should be advocating for better working conditions, wages and safety standards. Those are obviously good causes, but unfortunately, This good cause seems to have gone bad on a number of fronts, and I have to give a big credit to Nine Entertainment's news publications for this most remarkable story of the week. It has everything. So, allegedly, bikies, criminals, and underworld figures have infiltrated the construction and general division of the CFMEU, and that includes within government-funded projects. There's allegations of senior officials taking bribes, receiving free building work worth hundreds of thousands of dollars from major builders. There are also claims of CFMEU officials threatening factional opponents at their homes. The allegations of misconduct have been so serious that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announced that Labor's national executive will sever ties with the CFMEU, following similar moves by some state governments, and union divisions in Victoria, Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia and Tasmania will be placed under administration. Now, there are more measures in place, but Opposition Leader Peter Dutton said this isn't enough and called for the union's deregistration, claiming their behaviour could be the biggest defrauding of Australian taxpayers in history. The scandal is particularly tricky for the government, given the union's involvement in major construction projects and obviously its close ties to the Labor Party. Some members have transitioned from the union to Parliament. The CFMEU leadership wants politicians to stay out of it, but that is unlikely to be able to happen. This story will continue to unfold over weeks or months, making it a gripping tale of power, corruption, and high stakes in the Australian construction industry. Remarkable.
Oh, that is remarkable. And Nick McKenzie and the team at Nine, as you mentioned, Adam, what a great investigative journalism effort to sort of uncover that, well, scandal. It's remarkable how long it's gone on and how deep it is. Sean, you've got to come up with something really remarkable.
Over to you, Sean.
I mean, that is a cracking story, and I got one more remarkable. But just before I go on to it, I did like Zach Smith, the national president, coming out, and they said, "What do you reckon?" He goes, "Oh, we'll look after this ourselves. You know, we don't. You guys butt out."
Which is part of the issue.
I believe so. It's slightly a tin ear to what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, and as you said, Stephen, the Nine guys have done a spectacular job. Nick McKenzie, best journalist in the country at the moment. It is truly the second most remarkable story of the week. The most remarkable story. And tell me, Stephen, if I'm wrong, the employment market. Come on. It's got to be the most remarkable thing that happened this week. Everything seems to be telling us that it should be, if not falling in a heap, at least losing a bit of steam. But it just isn't. You know, like, I've got to say, I feel a bit like Michael right now. Me trying to impress Stephen Koukoulas based on economic knowledge.
You're doing okay. Hang in there.
Yeah, just a bit rich, but I'll try. About 50,000 people found work last month, mostly in full-time jobs, according to Bureau statistics. That didn't stop the unemployment rate rising to 4.1% from 4%, with the ongoing surge in foreign arrivals pushing more people into the labour market. Now, the participation rate, the proportion of people working or looking for a job, jumped to a near record high of 66.9%. The number of hours worked rose by nearly 1% in June, but the Bureau said more people than usual were unwell during the month, which I thought was quite an odd thing for the Bureau to say. You know, more people having sick leave and fewer people taking annual leave. Now, economists like Stephen, wonderful people.
We are.
Yeah. You get a bit excited about the 50,000 jobs in the immediately after the numbers, but really you talk about the unemployment rate. You don't really talk about the number of jobs. So this release, it would have had something for everyone. You could argue whichever way you wanted to argue. But 4.1%, and at the end of the day, that suggests that the labour market is loosening just a bit, even though it still remains pretty strong. Of course, all this feeds into interest rate deliberations. The CPI reading on July 31 is the big one on that. But really, I think it's remarkable how the employment market has behaved over the past 18 months with all these leading indicators saying it's going to get softer. And it has a little bit, but not properly. Much more remarkable than some dodgy CFMEU story, Stephen.
Sean, that is a remarkable story. But in another sense, it's arguably one of the most unremarkable stories because the unemployment rate is tracking exactly, hear me out, tracking exactly as the RBA was forecasting.
Whack again.
If it was different to their forecast, that would be remarkable.
Third whack.
The fact that the labour market is resilient was part of their forecast. So to me, it's important. I want everybody who wants a job to have a job. I like low unemployment. It's good for society. And, the Chardonnay socialist in me really likes to see, job creation. It is remarkable. But the CFMEU, my goodness, that goes to the core of politics, into the labour movement and what's going to be happening to the unionised parts of the Australian economy. And, of course, unionism in Australia has dropped dramatically over recent decades. This is not going to instill a lot of people to put their faith in the union movement. CFMEU, bad people. It's remarkable. Adam, you won that one by 2.5 lengths, being with your ears pricked.
Oh, we're back.
Yeah, look, let's face it, when Adam started with CFMEU, I knew I had no chance. I was just throwing in a bit of economics, sort of appealing to you that way. But
No, Sean, I was impressed.
I tried.
But it's not remarkable. If we were getting unemployment back at 3.5...
We heard you the first time, Stephen. We heard you the first time.
It's okay. It's important.
Well done, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
1-1 as we head to the break. We will be back in a moment.
Welcome back to the weekend edition. Now, Sean, we are 1-1 at the halfway mark. It's time for Sleeper Story of the Week.
Well, it is, but can I just suggest that we judge the judge at this point, because I do believe he truly whacked me around that last category, the most remarkable category, and I think I'll touch unfairly.
Okay.
Well, we'll let the listeners judge that. So send your emails into the Fear and Greed contact area and see whether I've been fair on Sean or not.
All right. So we can just note the protest for now, Sean?
Yeah, just note it. I won by nose the first one. You won by 2.5 lengths, for God's sake. Okay, Sleeper Story. The Sleeper Story for me is the iron ore market, not because of what's happening to prices or share prices, but because of what's happening in Guinea, that doyen of West Africa, just near Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, the old Ivory Coast. I think it's Mali is another border with Guinea. Perhaps it isn't the cradle of democracy. I get that, given the military coups and stuff like that have occurred in the region over the years. But it could well become the home of iron ore. This week, Rio Tinto won final approval for a mega African iron ore project. It is big, really big. The reserve's called Simandou, and it has an estimated 2 billion tonnes of high-grade iron ore. It is the largest untapped reserve of high-grade ore in the world, and it has taken literally decades to get to this point. According to that well-known resources publication, African Business, which, to be honest, Kirk, I only came across this week in doing my research. However, let that not stop me.
I read it every week, Sean. Don't worry. I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah. So it describes Simandou as being subject to interminable delays owing to political instability, ownership disputes, and corruption claims. It has become a byword for failed resource exploitation. There you go. Anyway, Simandou itself is split into 4 blocks over 100 kilometres. Rio's consortium, which includes the Chinese state-owned companies and the government of Guinea, owns 2 of those 4 blocks. Rio is going to spend $11.6 billion US, it's about 18 billion Aussie, on the development of the deposit and the associated infrastructure. It's the infrastructure which is really fascinating. It involves developing 600 kilometres of rail infrastructure spanning the length of the country, as well as port infrastructure. Now, point here, Australia, and to a lesser extent Brazil, are the dominant countries in the iron ore world. And Rio, along with BHP, Fortescue and Vale, are the dominant producers. But I think, assuming Simandou goes well, and it seems to have this week we got the final approvals, we're going to have to add Guinea to the list of iron ore giants. This could totally change the economics of iron ore, and that will affect not just a bunch of companies, it'll also affect millions of shareholders. It'll affect the Australian government of the day because, of course, they're affected by those, well, they're on the teat of royalty payments, let's face it. It is a massive sleeper story.
That is a good one, Sean. And 2 billion tonnes of high-grade iron ore is an awful lot. And that has the potential to change, the Australia's cash cow, if you like, of having all of its iron ore. Fascinating that it is a sleeper. Adam, come on,
all
mate.
Right.
You've got to wake us up now with a true sleeper.
All right. My nomination for Sleeper Story of the Week the EV dream may be having a couple of night tremors.
Ooh.
So what do I mean by that? Rental car companies in the US are quietly dumping EVs, with Hertz notably pulling back on its ambitious plan to buy 100,000 Telstras. Why? It turns out that novice drivers find EVs hard to charge and difficult to control. Last year, over 4% of cars sold to rental companies were EVs. This year, the number has dropped to just 1.4%, and this is according to the New York Times. The root of the problem lies in infrastructure and user experience. Most airport rental complexes lack sufficient chargers, making it difficult for renters to keep their EVs powered up. Additionally, many drivers are unprepared for the rapid acceleration of electric cars, leading to more accidents and higher insurance premiums. This unexpected surge in insurance costs has actually turned EVs into a financial headache for rental companies. Moreover, the resale value of EVs has plummeted, further discouraging companies like Hertz from expanding their EV fleets. Spare parts for EVs are also harder to come by compared to fuel cars, and that's compounding the operational challenges. So the initial love affair with EVs seems to be waning as rental companies grapple with these practical and financial hurdles. While the world continues to push for greener options, this retreat by the rental car industry highlights the complexities of transitioning to electric vehicles. And that's why it's my nomination for Sleeper Story of the Week.
Oh, that really hurts, doesn't it?
Oh,
Very good.
Oh, sorry. Pun intended. Look, a really good sleeper story. And of course, we are in that transition towards EVs, but like any revolution in the way that economies function, we consumers operate, businesses operate, there's always going to be hiccups and hurdles. And so that's an important story. But I am blown away with the 2 billion tonnes of iron ore as something that, will have an impact on the Australian economy. So if Rio are going to make money from it, they're fine. They're going to be making truckloads of money from digging the iron ore out and exporting it around the world. But for our Australian-based operations, and as Sean touched on, the royalties, the company tax payments that are linked to these incredibly high iron ore prices that we're still getting, by the way, even though it's come off a bit, they're still elevated as Michael pointed out brilliantly in his assessment last week.
Self-serving, Kook, self-serving.
But that story as a sleeper and the implications for the iron ore market and the Australian economy is one that I hope the government policymakers are keeping an eye out, because it could be one of those that provides a bit of into the iron ore cash cow.
Kick up the arse, I think, is the phrase you're looking for.
So, Sean, you won that one. Yeah, by a length and a half, leading all the way. You're almost run down, but you hung on and won right on the line.
I'm finding, Adam, it's more fun when you're judged because I can abuse you more. But like Stephen's kind of got this sort of sense of
dignity.
And intellect, actually. I think intellect. And like, I don't feel quite as at ease abusing the judge this time around.
Oh, look, I cop abuse everywhere, Sean, so don't hold back. But depends who's offering the abuse, whether I take it to heart or not.
Right. Okay, let's go to the favourite story. How about you go first on this one, Adam?
Alrighty, my favourite story for the week. This is my nomination, the quirky, bold and intriguing story of Seven Network's bold move to inject comedy and horoscopes into their news programming.
Wow.
Yes, you heard that right. Starting this week, 7 News has been shaking up its traditional evening news format by adding daily horoscope readings and a weekly dash of comedy. This is a fascinating case of a major network trying to stay vital in an ever-evolving media landscape. So why are they doing it? With viewership patterns shifting and younger audiences favouring digital platforms over traditional TV, 7 News is betting on an injection of entertainment to grow their audience. Imagine tuning in for the latest headlines and getting a daily dose of humour and a peek at your astrological forecast. It's a blend of infotainment that could either be a stroke of genius or a short-term gamble. The network believes that by adding these unconventional segments, they can keep viewers engaged longer and perhaps even attract new ones who typically wouldn't watch the news. Critics argue that it undermines the seriousness of news reporting, while supporters see it as a fresh way to connect with a broader audience. Regardless of where you stand, there is no denying that this strategy is a bold departure from the norm and a fascinating experiment in modern media. So stay tuned to see if Seven's horoscope and comedy experiment pays off. And of course, whether Stephen Koukoulas declares that my win of this category is in the stars. Sean, over to you.
That's just a story about the free-to-airs going down the toilet, isn't it?
No.
What I did like, so Rupert Murdoch this week talked about newspapers had at best 15 years left. This is printed newspapers. And then we had Tim Burrows come out afterwards, the wonderful Tim Burrows from Unmade. And Tim said, so who's going to actually die first? Is it going to be the free-to-airs or is it going to be the newspapers? Which is a good question. I mean, the point of your story, Adam, of course, is that the free-to-airs are doing everything they possibly can to draw an audience. But wow, who'd like to be in those industries at the moment? Not me. I move on. My favourite story is all about a bloke called Ken Griffin. We'll call him Kenny. He's the founder of the massive Citadel hedge fund. This week, he paid $44.6 million for a 150 million year old stegosaurus known as Apex. It is the most valuable fossil ever sold at auction. I do remember when I lived in New York many years ago and my son Charlie was 3 and we took him to the National History Museum and there's a big dinosaur skeleton then and we're talking about going to see the dinosaurs. It's very exciting. We got there, we walked in and he just looks up and he goes, it's dead. Like, yes, it is dead. I forgot to tell you about that part. Anyway, Kenny paid $44.6 million for this specimen. It was discovered in a town called Dinosaur in Colorado. Ironic, isn't it? And it's mostly intact, though it does appear to have had a touch of arthritis. So much to this story. The fossil is 3.35 metres tall, 8.2 metres long. The sale price was about 11 times what Sotheby's thought it would fetch. Kenny, Mr. Griffin, he plans to put the dinosaur on a display at a US museum, which is fantastic, but he's a bit of a fan of prehistoric creatures. In 2018, he gave $16.5 million to the Field Museum in Chicago to fund the display of a cast of the biggest dinosaur ever discovered. That was a titanosaur, apparently, found in Argentina. The story gets better. The town, Dinosaur, used to be called Baxter Springs because it was owned by the Baxter family. And then in the oil boom, about the 1940s, it became Artesia because it had a good water supply. And then it became its current name in 1966, Dinosaur, because it's very close to the Dinosaur National Monument. Now, at the Dinosaur National Monument, there are about 800 paleontology sites, hence the name Dinosaur. The auction this week has triggered a bunch of stories about people buying fossils. Now, the Financial Times was reporting that the first dinosaur to be sold at auction was Sue, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, back in 1997. She fetched $8.4 million, now on display in the Field Museum. Stan, a male Tyrannosaurus Rex, was sold for $31.8 million at Christie's in 2020. It's now in Abu Dhabi. Fossils have also caught the attention of celebrities. There was a famous auction fight between Leonardo DiCaprio and Nicolas Cage. It was a dinosaur skull. Cage ultimately won. But then the funny thing was, a few years later, he returned it after investigators determined it had been illegally acquired. Anyway, talk about going down a rabbit hole. Such a cracking story, or a dinosaur hole. They probably didn't have... Just a cracking story that our man Kenny Griffin, $45 million for Apex, the Stegosaurus.
What a contrast in stories. And Adam, the horoscope in the news. Well, when it comes to love and romance, you might find yourself in a bit of a pickle this week.
That's very mean on Lara.
Anyway, not to worry. Look, great stories. You know, the demise of eyeballs on TV screens to watch the news is something that's been going on and will continue. It is a great story, though. Horoscopes and comedians. What next? It reminds me of Mike Moore and Frontline and some of the sort of dramatic stories that they had with the comedian and whatnot. Great story. Dinosaurs. Who doesn't love a good dinosaur story? Just the bones and the township of Dinosaur. I quite like that. But I think for a favourite story, for a quirky story to, you know, just sort of really encapsulate what's happening to the media, the news media, news, fake news, all this sort of stuff. I give that one to Adam because It's a favourite of mine too. And as someone who tries to read the horoscope and the stars where the economy's going, I can relate to why it's in the news. I'm going to be watching it. We might have a horoscope for where our interest rate's going. So, Adam, you've won that one.
Oh, wow.
Well,
2-2, Sean. Who would have thunk it?
Now, 2-2. I mean, I think it's probably a moral victory to you, Adam, because one of those stories you were 2.5 lengths in front, right? So,
yeah, I'll have to check the count back on that. Yes, but Sean, you had a very big handicap. So, do we have to do weight for age or on the handicap scale?
Because I was the one in the office working, and Adam's on holidays and Michael's on holidays. That's a handicap, isn't it?
It is.
The lone soldier.
But look, I can't separate you. This is a photo finish. Dead neat. Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Brilliantly covered, and favourite stories, sleepers. What an episode. I've learned so much today from the wonderful input and talent from you two debating these issues.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for being part of it. We love talking to you every Monday morning. And when you come on to this part, we see, I've known you for a long time. So I know this kind of funny side of you. And it's great when you're on the weekend edition because the listeners get to see that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And well done, team. 2-2. Penalty shootout? No. We'll end it there.
Skip that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam. Well done.
Make sure you're following us on the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Adam Lang, and that was the Fear and Greed Weekend Edition. We hope you have a great weekend.